Welcome to the Flickcast, the podcast about movies, TV, pop culture, and pretty much anything else. I'm Chris Ulrich. Joe Dilworth is off this week, so we have a guest on the show. His name is Rick Marshall. He's an award-winning journalist and a professional geek, two things you don't always hear together. But in his case, it works, and it works really well. He's also a good friend and a really good guy. And he was nice enough to come on this show, so you got to give him that. All right, here's Rick. It's been a while since you and I spoke. How have you been? How's everything going?
Well, it's always a case of whenever anybody asks, how you doing? It's always as good as can be expected. We're all sort of dealing with things these days. It's a very different situation. I've been, working from home for most of the last decade or more. And so a lot of people, say, oh, this must be no big deal for you. Suddenly, everybody's at home and, you're still working from home. It's not a big change, but, it is. And I got, two kids and my wife's working from home as well. And so we're all sort of in the house here, taking it day by day, figuring out what's going on with school and work and juggling all of these things. So every day is a new challenge.
It definitely is. Yeah, I have a kid too, and I know it's much more difficult because he's doing school at home. So it's basically I'm a parent and I'm a teacher and I'm doing all those things. So it must be. I guess it's more difficult if you have more than one kid. At least if I put him in front of the computer for an hour or two to do school, quote unquote, then at least I know where he is, and it's not. I can get a chance to do something. But you're trying to have a whole career and everything too with the kids at home too, right? I mean, you're actually working. I'm not working, so it's probably easier. But how do you manage to juggle all that? It seems like a lot.
Well, it definitely is. And luckily, we have two kids where one is old enough to sort of entertain the other. And so that's been sort of a help there. And, it's a lot of working on a laptop in, on a dining room table for a good chunk of the day and listening to them sort of be quiet for a little while and be thankful for that. And then not be quiet for a little while and, deal with that as you can. And thankfully, both my wife and I have very understanding, employers and such. So we have had a very good situation in that, I watch them for a chunk of the day and keep an eye on them. And then she sort of takes over and takes this shift of the day. And we just rotate back and forth. And, every day is sort of a new, okay, what's on our schedule for today? What do you have to do? What do I have to do? How are we going to figure this out? And I feel like we're definitely not alone in that. There's a lot of people dealing with a similar sort of situation.
Yeah, it seems like unfortunately, it's pretty common now. I'm just, as I've said on other episodes of the show, it's just I feel very privileged that I can be, although I don't want to use the word privilege maybe, but lucky, I guess, that I can stay home and sort of ride this out. I don't have to be out there necessarily. And you're kind of lucky in a way too, I guess, because you work at home. Like you said, before this all happened, you were at home. So we're able to do that. My wife has to go out sometimes and work, but she has a weird job where she doesn't really interact with people much, so that's good. And now doing school and everything, it's a lot. But you know what? It's not going to last forever. I think we're going to come out on the other end, and hopefully everything will be better. That's what I feel anyway. I'm trying to be optimistic.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I feel like that. It could be far worse. We've moved up, a few hours north of New York City, and I just keep thinking about the fact that if we were still sort of in our little apartment in Queens, where we were, just 6-7 years ago, and going through all this, it would be so much more difficult and so much more stressful. So I try to look at things and think about how much worse it could be for us. I mean, we're in a house now where we have several floors in between us if we need to. And, we have a pool in our backyard, which is nice. It's been a good summer for that. So
that's nice.
It could be much, much worse. And, we've kept busy and it's been a decent summer in that, it hasn't been a horribly hot and, there's been some really good days. So, I mean, I try to be thankful for the good parts of the situation that we're in.
Yeah, definitely. So you work online almost all exclusively, right? I mean, you write for, I know, Digital Trends. Are you doing any other writing for any other place, or what are you working on?
For the most part these days, it's pretty much all Digital Trends right now. They've been really great to me, and I've been sort of expanding my role there. I'm doing most of their entertainment coverage at this point. A lot of features, a lot of interviews, a lot of movie reviews, TV reviews, that sort of thing. And that site has grown so much in the last few years that there's been more than enough work for me to do. And it's something where I really like working for them, so I've been happy to sort of make them my focus. Here and there, I've done some some copywriting work for a few places and some, freelance assignments here and there for a few other entertainment sites. It's funny, I actually did some work for a California tourism site a while ago. It shows you how funny like freelancing can be, because I'm over here on the East Coast, and I actually did some writing about some entertainment stuff related to locations in California, and I was just laughing because I'm like, yeah, here, I don't know when I'm going to ever be able to get to California in the near future, but I literally just wrote a bunch of things for a California tourism site.
I mean, you could probably get there, but you probably don't want to go there.
Exactly. I think that's really what it is. I'm kind of trying to stay as local as possible these days.
No, that's smart, and it sounds like you have a good situation where you can take a little space from people. So. You said you were doing a lot of reviews and all that stuff, but there's one thing you didn't review, right? Recently, I noticed that you were sort of, and this will sort of segue us into our discussion that we're going to talk about, like, how things are with going to the movies and all that stuff. You didn't review Tenet, right?
Yes, I did not, and it's funny. My non-review, the headline was, "We are not reviewing Tenet, and here's why."
Yeah.
And I felt like that really summed up the entire sort of op-ed that I was writing about it, because I just didn't feel that it was worth the risk to go to a theater. I know a lot of my colleagues, sort of took the trip out to Connecticut, which is I think the closest theater to here, or to Massachusetts or such, and Warner Brothers' decision, while I respect why they're doing it, I just feel like it's a very dangerous decision to sort of force people into indoor theaters to see Tenet. They're not making the movie available at drive-in theaters in regions where indoor theaters aren't open, which includes New York State. So yeah, I talked with sort of the editorial team at Digital Trends and explained that I don't really feel comfortable going to an indoor theater at this point. We have some high-risk people in my family, and they were, to their credit, they completely understood. There was never a bit of pushback. There was never a bit of, hey, well, maybe we can get somebody else on, or this or that. They actually said, you know what, that's a good point you're making about this. And, why don't you sort of write out why we're not reviewing it? Because I think that's an important perspective to have on this movie's premiere.
No, that's nice that they were so cooperative, because I can think of a lot of places that might not have been. Maybe places that we used to work for. Who knows?
I think you may be correct.
Maybe so, yeah. So do you think that we'll ever get to a point? Because I know theaters are reopening and people are trying to go places. I know Tenet came out, as we were just talking about. And like in Austin, Alamo Drafthouse, the sort of famous theater chain that everyone loves, is opening and trying to get people back in the theaters, and they're trying to take precautions. But do you think there'll ever be a time when people will go to the theater in droves again? And do you think it's going to get back to quote unquote normal at all? Or are we just going to be doing video on demand now? Or what do you think is going to happen?
I think that, indoor theaters are going to open back up again, and people are going to be going back to them. I think a lot depends on the vaccine situation. I think that that's going to be really the thing that sort of, that knocks over sort of all of the other factors that were stopping us from going to a theater. Once that's there, I think that's going to be the game changer for getting things back to quote unquote normal. But I also think that we have sort of past the point where on-demand video is, no longer an option. I think that that's something that studios are going to have to consider going forward. And I think we're getting a lot of data now that studios might have been reluctant to even collect in the past, because they would not have wanted to risk putting movies out, to on demand, and now they're being forced to. So we've got some data now about how much a movie can earn when it gets released in that way. So I think that we're going to get back normal. There's going to be indoor theaters for people who want that experience, because it really is a one-of-a-kind experience, and I miss it. But I think that we're also going to see on demand as a much more viable option going forward.
Well, by the time this episode drops, I mean, Mulan would have been out for a little while, and I don't know how it's doing, because when we're recording this, I think it just came out like yesterday or the day before as we're recording this. So I don't know. It's $30. I mean, that seems like a pretty good deal for the entire family. But I guess this is a good experiment, because they're not going to maybe, I don't want to say waste the opportunity on something like Black Widow or whatever. They're trying to test it out maybe with this. I don't know. But I feel like you're right. I think people are going to come back, but I don't know. Personally, I would love to go to a theater, but I'm going to be very, very reluctant, even when there's a vaccine, because that's still like a year away. I guess my question also is, are theaters even going to make it that far with all the people staying home? I don't know. I think we're going to see a lot of changes probably. Do you think that any will survive the whole time, or?
I think we're going to see some survive, but I also think we're going to see some very different scenarios with some of the theaters. I mean, we've we've seen the news right now where some of the streaming services are looking into purchasing their own theaters and purchasing their own theater chains, and there's a lot of other outside sort of companies that are seeing this as an opportunity to sort of pounce on theaters and have their own theaters. And I think that, when all the dust settles on this, we're probably going to reach a point where, there's going to be theaters owned by different companies. Maybe, maybe AMC and Regal, while they'll still be, top of the list, there might be some competition, or they might not have as many theaters. They might have to sell off some of theirs. I think that it's going to be a very different environment a year from now in terms of how the theater breakdown, is sort of settles.
Yeah, it's funny that law that it existed for so long that the studios couldn't own the theaters, which has now been, I guess, abolished. So you can see, I suppose, that the theaters or the studios, would probably try to buy their own outlets. But you could see a Netflix theater or something like that. Although I kind of feel like Netflix maybe doesn't really need that anymore. But I'd like to look ahead in the future and see how it all goes. I think we'll have people go back, but it'll be more like a specialty thing, maybe. And the people that want to go will be able to go. But I think you're right. I think that a lot of places won't survive. Some will, and some people will still go. But psychologically, though, it's just, I like theaters, and I like going to see movies in a theater. I think you should experience a lot of things. Like Tenet, I think it's a perfect thing as an example to see in a theater. It's a Christopher Nolan movie. It's going to be a spectacle. But for me, it's just also psychological. I don't like crowds, and so that's why I go to some place like Alamo where the seats are a little bit more spread out and you don't have a bunch of people right in front of you. And I don't care about the food and stuff and the booze, although that's a nice side thing. But I'm going to have trouble, I think, going at all, even when there's a vaccine, because is everyone going to take the vaccine? Is it going to be viable? Who knows? It's going to be hard. I don't know. I think I'm going to have trouble going to parties. I'm going to have trouble going a lot of places. So for me, staying at home hasn't been that bad because I kind of was avoiding people anyway. I don't know if that makes me a shut-in or what, but...
I definitely am twitching at the thought of all of the crowded, sold out movie premieres and things like that, like the opening weekend theater attendance that I've had in the past. And now just thinking about how closely together everybody was, and just, the line to get in and then to get out, and how closely you get packed, and everybody who walks by you and sort of, oh, excuse me, as, they're sort of squeezing by you into their seats. And now just the thought of that makes me twitch, which, says a lot about like what you're talking about, that psychological sort of aftermath of what we're going through right now.
Well, I also think of a thing like Comic-Con, because you and I have been to Comic-Con before, and it's just, I can't imagine walking through the main floor, or Hall H or something, or waiting in line. That you're pressed together, and people are like crowds, and there's like strollers, and there's all kinds of. It's impossible to have any distance or anything. I wonder what's going to happen with conventions too, because Comic-Con's a big deal, and I loved going there when I was younger, and we went there for work and all that stuff and covering it and everything. But it's crowded, and I remember distinctly thinking, wow, it's so great to be press, even though at Comic-Con, press isn't treated necessarily any better than anybody else. And I'm not going to, get down on Comic-Con for that, but it happens. But at least you got to go in sort of the back area and the tunnels and stuff in the back where there wasn't a lot of people walking around. That was one positive thing. And in the press room, there wasn't as many people. I can't imagine going back to a place like that as a spectator now, or as just a person buying a ticket. It would just be horrible. I don't know.
Oh my gosh,
Will Comic-Con survive? When do those kind of things survive? Is it all going to be, because we just had the DC Fandom thing recently, right, which was all online, and so I wonder if we'll ever see conventions again.
Well, it's interesting. They had that San Diego at home thing, the Comic-Con at home thing that San Diego put on.
Right.
And it got a lot of flack for being sort of a flop because it didn't get, this many views, or that the YouTube feeds that they had. But someone else sort of brought this up, and I wish I could remember who, but there was a column that was written about maybe it wasn't that bad. And after looking at some of the data myself, then I read that column and looked at some of the data myself, and it maybe wasn't a flop, like by the standards that we would apply as people who go to these conventions, as people who host panels, because some of these panels were getting a pretty decent amount of views, and they wouldn't have attracted that many people at San Diego Comic-Con. Like some of these minor panels that would have probably only had a few people in attendance were actually getting a pretty decent amount of views. And so while we didn't have the Marvel stuff, or we didn't have the massive things that San Diego is known for in this in this Comic-Con at home sort of video environment, I don't know if we can really write off the Comic-Con at home as being a total flop. And DC Fandom did really, really well, and they're really hyping how well DC Fandom did. And I don't know if they did that much better than some of the Comic-Con at home things. And I think people are sort of getting more acclimated to this idea of watching some of these panels and events and live streaming things, on their computer. And I think it took Comic-Con at home was sort of the that sort of took the brunt of things. I think people were still learning how to do that. And then DC Fandom came at a time when people already knew how to do that. And so I think they benefited from that. And they had a lot bigger stars for a lot of things. And so I think that, we could be seeing sort of a rise in these virtual events. But to be honest, I think San Diego Comic-Con is going to come back eventually, but it's just going to have to wait until there is a bit more certainty with how we can all be safe. And the same thing with New York Comic Con and Repop, all of their shows. I think we're going to see all these come back, but not until after there's some sort of certainty, some data in there that says that this can go on and that there's not a likelihood of an outbreak. Because, you and I both know, going to San Diego Comic Con, you can use as much hand sanitizer as you could possibly pack.
Yeah, you can bathe in that stuff, yeah.
Yeah, you can refuse to shake hands. You can put in all of these safety measures possible to try to avoid getting sick at Comic-Con and still come home with the con crud, man. You're sneezing, and everything else, and still end up getting sick 2-3 days after Comic-Con. So, with something that's this contagious, there has to be some data in there, and I think that's what they're going to have to wait on.
Yeah, I can't imagine. They were smart to cancel it. I think you're right. I think also partially this sort of, I don't want to say backlash, but maybe backlash is the right word, that people were having against this Comic-Con at home thing was that, fanboys and nerds can get angry about stuff, as you've experienced, I'm sure, in the past, and are still experiencing, I'm sure. I know, shocking, right? Geeks can get angry about stuff. So, and they're not exactly nice about it. And so I think yeah, I think that was part of it too. I think you just can't please people sometimes, and those are the people that are just going to be more vocal. And I'm sure you found this to be the case, but I feel like it's either one of two things. Either people are super excited and they say something nice, or they're super angry and they say something negative. But the majority of people were like, "Oh, that was okay," but they're not going to comment about it because they're not moved to comment. They're not they're not indifferent, but they're like, "Oh, that was fine." But I don't feel like being an asshole and getting on there and giving somebody a hard time about it. Or "Oh my God, that was amazing." I've got to let people know. So I think part of it is that, and I think that maybe by DC Fandom, people just got a little bit more used to the idea, like you said, and as it goes on that way, they're going to have to get more and more used to it, because we're not going to have these live events for a while. It's the way it's going to be. And so some of the fanboys are going to get angry and they're going to talk shit. So
fanboys getting angry? What is this world coming to?
I know. I know you deal with a lot of that shit, and it's not cool. And I know since we've known each other, I know you've dealt with it since day one. And it's just I don't know why. It seems like I've gotten some negative comments over the years, but I don't know that I've gotten as much sort of terrible things said to myself as you've had said to you. It's just,
oh God, yeah. I've only in the last couple of years have I in the last 3 or 4 years have I actually had to bring in law enforcement and report something. I was I even had to ask them, I don't know exactly how I should be reporting this, but I am reporting something that seems like a threat of violence and makes me really worried, just so you have it on the record, sort of thing. Is this a thing you guys
if something
down?
Happens to me, you'll know what happened, and these are the people responsible, these anonymous trolls.
And these are for op-eds and movie reviews, and it's gotten really bad. The last couple of years have been really bad. I still remember one of my favorite ones was, a while back, was for The Dark Knight Rises, was still one of my favorite nasty comments that I've ever received, was a response to a review of The Dark Knight Rises, in which the person wrote, "You, sir, are someone I would like to punch in the face."
Yeah, I think I remember you talking about that. It's
I've always respected that one. That mix of formality and aggression in one, and I've loved that one. That one is one that I've treasured for years as my favorite.
Did you get that framed and hang on the wall or something?
I almost want to. I wish I could just print that out and frame it. But in the last couple of years, they've gotten really bad. In response to op-eds and negative reviews of a movie, I've gotten people sending me videos of themselves loading guns and talking about.
Seriously? Oh my God.
Yeah. I was sent a video of somebody loading a gun and basically pointing out that like, oh, it would be a shame if some unstable person found out where you lived. Things like that. I'm paraphrasing, but
that's ridiculous.
Yeah, and I've had things like that, and people sending me photos of themselves holding rifles with like things that say "Die Journalists Die" on them, and pointing at the camera, and yeah, it's been pretty rough. And this has been a response to movie reviews and op-eds, and that's what always gets me about this is it's movie reviews and op-eds about movies.
Yeah, it's like you're talking shit about their favorite president or anything. So I wonder, I mean, you said the last couple of years, and of course I have to think, gee, what happened a couple of years ago that may have had some effect on this? And this isn't a political show, so I'm not going to talk about that necessarily, but there were one big event in particular that seems to be influencing the people to come out of the woodwork a little bit more and be a little bit more threatening. I don't know if that's a coincidence.
It's hard not to draw certain conclusions about certain things just from my side of things and seeing how much of an uptick there was in things. But there's definitely been things that recently made me go through and scrub my social media presence of as many sort of personal identifying factors as I could. Like I made my Instagram private. I've had to basically just lock down several of my social media feeds just to make sure that, just because I was worried, I got a family and, whether or not it's just some, basement dwelling troll sending me these videos or somebody who actually, could have ill intent. I think it's, a safety measure worth taking.
Yeah, I mean, you can't be too careful, I guess, with family especially. Luckily, I haven't had that situation. I guess I must not say anything interesting enough or quote unquote controversial enough. I mean, you're expressing an opinion about a movie and someone doesn't agree with you. Can't they just say you're wrong about it and tell you why? And can't we just have discourse? Why does it have to resort to violence? I don't understand. I don't understand that mindset. I've been upset about things and I've been angry about things, and I probably was angry about something today even because I've got a 7-year-old and you get angry sometimes. And he's been home for 7 months, and he's like, up in my face all the time. No,
I know this feeling.
He's a great kid. No, I'm just kidding. But I've never, ever once thought about, sending an email to somebody and showing them a gun, or anything like that. I don't know. It takes a certain kind of, I don't want to say unstable person, but I feel like that's not normal behavior. It seems
no, it's not.
I hope it is abnormal.
It's gotten more frequent lately, which is as I said, like for me, which is very unfortunate. And I can at this point I can write something and I will sometimes just warn digital trends beforehand, like warn whoever I'm doing the or whoever I'm writing it for. I will usually say, okay, here's this assignment, here's this thing that I'm writing for you. Just let your social media people know ahead of time that this is coming, and they might want to monitor, the social feeds or things like that, because they're probably going to get some nasty things in there that they'll want to watch out for. And more often than not, that has happened. But yeah, I can kind of tell now certain things that I'll be writing, and I'll be like, yep, somebody's going to get really annoyed at this, and I'm going to get some horrible mail about this. And I don't do it because of that, but I just know that, because there's certain things that set people off, and it's an unfortunate feeling. It's an unfortunate side effect of the gig.
Yeah, I can't. Again, I don't understand it, and I would never think like that. And the fact that it happens at all, I think is just is horrible. Man, I don't know.
But at the same time, like you said, we're all
it's ridiculous,
cooped up in our houses these days and isolated, and there's also a whole lot of psychological aspects at play right now that sort of accelerate sort of certain psychological states, I guess. And, I can't say that's to blame for all of it, because a lot of this was happening prior to, lockdown, the pandemic and all of that. But, we're in a weird state right now where anything can happen. It's really strange because we've never all really been in this situation.
Yeah, I read something, and I mentioned this on a different episode, so forgive me, people, if you've already heard this, but I read something that said, we're all basically in a state of fight or flight all the time, but we can't flee.
Yeah, that's very. I thought
that was very, very good analysis of the whole situation. It's like, yeah, I feel anxious all the time. I was never a person prone to being anxious or nervous that much, fortunately. But now, now I'm a little more anxious and nervous, and I feel bad for you. I'm anxious and nervous for you now. Shit. Geez. So. What, and I'm sort of curious, in the last couple of years, what was sort of the most controversial kind of thing that you put out there? What was it? Some review or something, or an op-ed, or what was the most
See, I think the
controversial
most recent thing that generated a lot of very angry and sort of just sort of aggressive response. I wrote an op-ed, I think, a while back when Joker was coming out. And I wrote an op-ed about Joker, which, I knew this was going to be because the movie was such a polarizing film. And I wrote that basically, I think that it's unfortunate that we so casually dismiss the Aurora victims and victims' families when they had expressed some concern about Joker, and when they had expressed some concern about this film, they had wrote a sort of open letter about the movie Joker and about its potential effect on people who might be unstable. And I saw a lot of my colleagues and other people sort of dismissing that and saying, oh, it's a movie, so we can't really do that. It's art has to be art, and you got to let art be art. And I get that, but I also feel like in an era where we stress listening to people and listening to victims, particularly, it seems like a strange thing to do to suddenly dismiss these victims when it's something that we want to see, when it's a movie, when it's something that we like. We so conveniently sort of push that aside. And I didn't recommend in this op-ed to not see the movie. I didn't recommend that, the movie shouldn't be shown or shouldn't premiere. I just wrote an op-ed about the fact that I think that it's important to listen to victims and listen to their perspective, and then make a decision also taking, their perspective into account as well. And I think and the studio should take their perspective into account, as well as audiences who want to see the movie. And that was really the entire gist of my op-ed, was that, hey, let's not conveniently dismiss, let's not dismiss victims and what their perspectives are, when it's convenient for us, and when it, is just works against something in our favor, So that one was really bad, and it got picked up by some pretty crazy right-wing radio sites and things like that, and I got asked to be on interviews, but there were interviews to be on these shows where I knew it was just not going to be a good faith sort of discussion.
No, that was it. That was a bait to get you in there.
Yeah. Yeah, and I got a lot of that, and it was interesting. I got a lot of angry messages from people, and that's one of the ones where I got a message from someone who took a video of themselves loading a gun and saying that, they were coming to have a discussion with me about my feelings on the Joker. And, that was a bit of a stressful message to get. But,
yeah, I can imagine. And
that was part one.
You didn't even say anything negative about the movie. You just thought it was good to listen to people and consider opinions of others, and take that stuff seriously, as other people should take it seriously. You didn't in any way tell people not to go to the movie or that the movie sucked or anything else. You didn't even do a review of the movie at that point, right? But you did a review.
I did not review the movie, only because the backlash to this op-ed that I wrote.
Yeah, shit. What if you hated it, right? And oh my god,
yeah,
I can't even
imagine. It
was
so severe and so aggressive that I didn't think there was any way that I could review the movie without sort of that lurking in the back of my mind. I was too deep into it. I was too into the weeds there with the philosophical sort of aspects of surrounding it, that I didn't think there was any way I could do the sort of review that I like to do, where I really just kind of judge the movie by, well, if someone sees a trailer, like when I review movies, I like to say, hey, if somebody sees a trailer and says, oh, I'd like to see that, what would that person think of the movie? Would they be satisfied with it? And in this one, there was just too many other things going on for me to be fair to the film.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that for sure. And I won't even ask you what you thought of it, so that's too controversial, probably. So
I think Joaquin Phoenix was fantastic.
Yeah, he really was, and I think that I've seen a lot of the Joker, and I've seen what Heath Ledger did with it, and I thought that it couldn't be topped, or you'd have a different take on it. I think there's room for both of those guys, and I think they both did a really great job realizing that character, and I think that they can both have a place in the sort of pantheon of Jokers as some of the top ones. I also like Jack Nicholson as Joker too. I don't know if that's controversial, but
no, I think it was. I think that I have nothing negative to say about the film, but I just couldn't really write about it to that point, especially when a review would have made sense
Yeah.
to do of the film at that point, because there were so many other factors around things. I have nothing negative to say about the film as it is. I think Joaquin Phoenix is a well deserving for all the accolades for his performance.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So, but do you think that fanboys can do? I mean, sometimes they can be a force for good. I suppose. I guess that's a matter of opinion. If you believe that the Snyder Cut is a good thing, do you think it's a good thing, or do you think it's a ridiculous thing, or do you think it's sort of like a whatever? Are you different? Kind of. I'm kind of indifferent, to be honest. But
I just am glad that it's coming out so that I can stop hearing about it. Like that's really like that's the
exactly.
best thing about it to me, is that hopefully we'll just stop hearing about it, because unfortunately some of the really like toxic messaging that has come my way, and things that have been sent to me have also come from people who have, released the Snyder Cut hashtag in their in their sort of social media handles. So I don't have the greatest feeling about the release the Snyder Cut movement. I feel like there was a lot of toxic sort of messaging in there, and but you know what? If this will stop people from talking about the Snyder Cut, I'm perfectly happy to do this. And you know what? I'll watch it. I'm gonna watch the Snyder Cut, Zack Snyder Justice League, when it comes out on HBO Max. I will absolutely be watching it, and then I will have a really tough decision to make as to whether to even say anything about it, because I
yeah.
know the way people get about that.
Well, do you think it's? I mean, if this kind of thing happens, at what point is it not going to be worth it for you to do this? I mean, I know you have to make a living, but it sounds like, I don't know. Hopefully, there'll be some changes, maybe around November sometime, and maybe some of this stuff will die down. We can always hope, but it seems like, I don't know. You don't get shit about everything, right? I mean, some of your reviews you don't get a terrible backlash for. I hope. I mean, there's some positive things about it, but I mean, at one point, do you think, God, maybe I should change careers or something?
It's never been that. I really like doing this. I have the job that, my 10-year-old self would never believe that you could make a living doing. Like, this was, if you had asked me what I would want to do for a living at that age, I would have said some sort of normal thing like, oh, I want to be a doctor, or I want to be this, or I want to be that, because I would have never thought that one could, make a living writing and talking and discussing movies and TVs and geek culture and all of these types of things, like, all that type of stuff, because it's an amazing place to be right now. Like I love talking about stuff. And unfortunately it's just, there is a very vocal, toxic sort of portion of the fandom in these. And I understand it. There's I grew up reading comics, and I understand that a lot of people who sort of have these sort of toxic attitudes did as well. And for some people, they feel like they're sort of the thing that was just theirs is now becoming more mainstream, and they resist that, and they, aren't happy about that. And it's unfortunate, but I know that the greater majority of people who enjoy these films and these genres and things like that are just want to enjoy them. I love talking with friends of mine now that were never into comics and were never into like sci-fi stuff back in the day, and now are suddenly into it. They're asking me like, hey, what do you recommend? Like, where can I read? What can I buy a comic to find out more about this movie that I saw? I love that that's a thing that's happening now with friends of mine.
Yeah, that's cool. That brings up a question too. So during all this time at home, you've obviously had a chance to watch a lot of stuff. So what are some of the things? Have you gone back to watch old movies and things, or do you not have time for that, or is there like comfort? I mean, I hate to use that word, comfort stuff, but I've found myself going back to watch old TV shows and old movies for some reason, like a lot of like old westerns and stuff, things I have on Blu-ray or even DVD, like old like, Hong Kong action films, like old John Woo stuff, like Hard Boiled or something, or just obscure things that I used to watch when I was a kid, or watching just, different stuff. But is there anything that's been sort of that you've gone back to, or that you've
Well,
just
it's been hard to find time to watch old stuff when there's always, so like the fact that I'm reviewing both movies and TV stuff. There's so much TV out when there's not even though there's no real big movies that have been coming out for the longest chunk of time there. there were so many TV shows coming out, and reviewing TV, as I'm sure you know, like reviewing TV series is such a time commitment because you're watching, like, you basically have to binge your way through an entire season in many cases, which is a whole lot longer than a movie, and then write a review. And but the old things that I go back to, there definitely have been. I watched the Beastmaster again recently. It used to be a sort of comfort movie favorite of mine, and it was on Amazon, and I started watching the Beastmaster again and was just amazed. I probably haven't watched it in about 10 to 20 years, and I was just suddenly amazed by how crazy some of the things that go on in that movie are, and the fact that it's rated PG. Just blew my mind, and that was a big part of my childhood, that movie. And now I'm thinking, I would never let my kid watch that movie.
No, God, no.
But yeah, that one, and you know what else? The also on Amazon, the BBC series of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I grew up as a reading Douglas Adams. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy was always one of my favorite books of all time. And I always loved the old BBC serial of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And that is sort of my comfort. When I put that on the background whenever I am working on something sometimes, or just want to be doing something around the house, I'll put that on. And just sort of because I know every word of that entire show.
Sure.
And it puts me in a happy place.
Well, that's funny you say that, because I never was a big fan of like BBC stuff. Like I have a good friend who's like a total Doctor Who fan. Doctor Who never really did it for me. Although I did like the spin-off show, which is totally escaping. Oh, Torchwood. I sometimes forget stuff. But so you have to watch stuff for work and everything, but is there anything that you get a chance? I mean, you mentioned these couple of things, but is there anything else you get to watch sort of for fun and for pleasure, or is it all work now, basically?
There is some stuff I'm watching for pleasure. Stuff that, I sort of missed doing reviews for a lot of the time. I end up watching for pleasure, and it's been fun. I've been watching, was it the Vow on HBO, the docuseries about the Nexium cult.
Oh, wow.
Which it seems like a funny thing to say that you're
watching that for fun.
Pleasure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, a lot of it was based around the capital region of New York, where I live, but most of the things that went down with it, like that were in the news, happened while I was living down in New York City. And so it's really fascinating to watch this show. My wife and I have been really enjoying it because it's just name dropping all of these places around where we live now. And it's sort of every time they'll pop in and show these like archival footage, we'll be like, oh wow, just really deep sort of distressing thing that they're talking about. And oh wait, the people are sitting at that place we went to lunch at like a few months ago.
That's fair. Hope you don't see yourself in the background somewhere, probably.
Yeah, it's very bizarre, and we've been watching as much as we can, for fun. But again, a lot of the time I have to end up sit down in my office watching things on my own because I have to kind of binge through these stuff so I can write reviews.
Sure. No, that makes sense. I mean, you got to work, right?
Yeah, exactly. And to be honest, it's been great too because it's been fun watching a lot of new things with my daughter. I don't do as many reviews of children's series and children's movies and such. So it's been really cool to sort of have some time with my kids, both my son and my daughter, to watch some of the great stuff that's coming out on Netflix and some of the other streaming services. Like Kipo and the Age of Wonder Beasts was just this amazing animated series that
I've never heard of that.
Oh, it's on Netflix. It is absolutely amazing. It's just wonderful. I can't say enough good things about it. It has amazing music. I end up buying the soundtrack to this show after watching the first season. So yeah. It's really, really good. We watched that, and discovering all these little hidden gems on Netflix has been fun.
Yeah, my son is into Skylanders. I don't know if your kids have watched that. Yeah, he's a big Skylanders fan, and now he's watching a Pokemon. There's some anime Pokemon on Netflix, and he's watching a bunch of stuff. You make a good point, an interesting point though, or a good point too, is that I never would have watched this stuff, a lot of things, and I get to experience a lot of it, and even the stuff that I loved as a kid or as a young adult or whatever, I get to experience it again with him, which is fun. And we watched Star Wars and we watched all that stuff. He really likes Star Wars, but he thinks the prequels are better, which is disappointing. But although Empire Strikes Back is his favorite, so that's good. That was something.
My daughter loved the prequels. It was distressing to my wife and I. We were just sort of watching, and she is just enthralled by the prequels and think they were like, she's cracking up laughing. She's loving all this stuff, and my wife and I are just sort of like behind her, sort of looking at each other, being like, "Oh God,
you can't like Jar Jar. You can't like him. He's horrible." Although I gotta be honest, my opinion of Jar Jar has softened over the years because I watched it with him and I was like, oh, you know what? It wasn't as bad as I thought. I mean, it probably was, but I just, maybe I'm just like I'm just dead inside now, so it doesn't matter.
We've been watching the Clone Wars, the animated series there on Disney Plus Live, which I had never watched. Those first few seasons when they were in their original run.
Yeah.
And I've been watching that with them, and that sort of helped me appreciate the prequels more because it really just takes this great dive deep into the motivations and what went on in between episode 2 and episode 3 that maybe made Anakin that way, and that sort of helped me cope with the prequels a lot more.
Yeah. Well, and again, I think it helps to watch it with somebody else who maybe doesn't have as much, I don't want to say baggage, but I'll be honest, I have a lot of baggage with Star Wars, as many people do. And so watching with him, he's like, oh, this is cool, and I like Anakin, and I like this. Why did he do that? I'm like, oh, you know what? I didn't think of that before. That's a good point, kid. You're smarter than I thought. But did you watch Mandalorian? Also, he loved that, which was cool. So.
Oh yes. I didn't watch that with my kids yet because we weren't sure what to expect from it.
Yeah.
And we wanted to kind of watch through it first.
I'm not a great parent, Rick. I got to be honest.
No, you know what? It's really just gauging like what your kid is into, and I know that our oldest got really scared by stuff that surprised me and some other things that we watched with her. So now I've been a bit more hesitant on some of the stuff that we put there. She got really scared about a couple of things that we put on that we thought would be totally fine. So we sort of pulled back a little bit. But yeah, I love Mandalorian. The shows. I just actually did a interview with one of the visual effects supervisors on that for Digital Trends, and it was just fun sort of like learning how deep of a dive some of the people involved with it took into Star Wars lore. Like at one point in the interview, he mentions the fact that one of the key projects that influenced the development of this one aspect of Mandalorian was the 1985 movie Ewoks: The Battle for Endor.
Wow. That is
I was like, wow, that's a blast from the past. I remember that coming out and then never being spoken of again.
Yeah, it's like the Christmas special. People talk about, I think people have more of a reverence for the Christmas special now, but I do remember Battle of Endor. I do remember that too. But
apparently that was the first appearance of those like creatures, the blurgs that they ride around on in Mandalorian, and that so they had to like go back to this 1985 movie that no one seems to remember or like all that much, and use all of like the photo assets from that, and there was like they had to take this dive into this movie that that most of us would rather forget, and I found it to be really, really amusing because Jon Favreau was apparently a huge fan of this film, and that was part of the reason why they did this, and I kind of love that that's a part of The Mandalorian, and that The Mandalorian is a part of Star Wars.
Yeah, I think that's the kind of thing I think Star Wars needs. I think it needs sort of stuff that ties in the same world, but I mean, obviously, bounty hunters and Boba Fett and all that stuff, it's attached to that and tied in that way. But I think it needs these kind of stories which are in the same world but also different, and that's why I liked it a lot, because it was just a little bit of Star Wars, but then it went on its own. It's kind of, I mean, I love Westerns, so it's kind of like I love the idea that it's a Western, but I also like. Obviously, it's a big influence, it was influenced by Lone Wolf and Cub, probably, right? That's what people say, and I agree with that. So that's the kind of stories that I like too, and it was so well done, and to see kind of how they did it behind the scenes, it's just amazing how it turned out, and I think that everybody's done such a great job, and
you can't go wrong with a good Western space opera.
No, you can't. I'm looking forward to season 2. I can't wait. It's coming pretty soon, so.
It's funny you mentioned Lone Wolf and Cub, and that's one of the things that has been occupying me during this lockdown. Is I went out and bought like a bunch of volumes, the Dark Horse omnibus volumes of Lone Wolf and Cub, and I've been reading through those now, and because I had never done it, I always never really gotten past the first big collection of it, and always like something else got me distracted, and so I've made it a point that I'm fully reading through Lone Wolf and Cub, and everybody's been joking with me about the fact, like, oh, see you in 6 years when you finish that one.
Yeah, it's a commitment for sure.
I love it. It's fantastic too. It's been a really fun read, and the fact that I've been reading that while Ghost of Tsushima came out for PlayStation 4, I started playing that, and suddenly I was like fully in this sort of Edo period Japan, sort of everything that I was doing was involved in that sort of era.
Yeah, I'm an Xbox player, but that game, I was like, wow, I really kind of want to get a PlayStation now. I mean, I had a PS4 or a PS3 for a while, and I used it some, but then I don't know what happened. I just sort of transitioned all to Xbox. But that's a beautiful looking game from everything I've seen, and I just sort of want to play it now. Plus, I'm a fan of that kind of action, samurai, and all that. And it just looked awesome. So, do you review games too, or is that just something you were doing for fun?
I used to. I used to review games, but no, this has definitely been a thing for fun. And to be honest, the reason I don't review games, like I've had people ask me to do a game review here and there, and
That's
you
probably
know,
dangerous too.
yeah, well, it's not even that. It's just I don't like to review games because you have to rush through it, and I
Oh,
really
sure.
like to take my time with games. In the past, when I've reviewed games, it just wasn't fun because I had to just kind of like barrel through the game, or whatever main campaign that you have in the game, and just get to the end and then try out all the extra stuff that gets unlocked, and then quickly write up something about it. And the amount of time invested just never made sense for me. So I've done it very, very rarely. I actually reviewed a few of, circling back to a previous time, I reviewed a few of the Skylanders games in the past
Oh,
for
there you go.
for a few outlets, and just because I have kids at home and was able to sort of interact with my kids and see what they think about Skylanders as well. But I don't do it for games that I'm really excited about because it just takes sort of the fun out of it for me.
No, I totally get that. That's why my family does not like watching movies or TV shows with me. Like my wife was like, okay, don't tell me why they shot this way. I'm like, well, they had a light over there, and it was shut up, don't spoil it. I can't help myself. I know how the sausage is made, and I can't help it. Sometimes I have to say, oh, you know why they did that, don't you? And she's like, just shut up and let me enjoy something, please. So it's just, it was fun though. She got into the Mandalorian. She's not a big sci-fi fan, but she does love Harry Potter, which is interesting. But we watched it all together as sort of our weekly sort of ritual. But yeah, now that you say that, I've been surprised occasionally about the things that my son has been sort of nervous about. But for the most part, he's been pretty good. I mean, he hasn't really come back to me and said that was scary. Like the other day, there was some YouTube video that scared him, and I tried to find it. He's like, there was some skeleton in it that was scary, and I was like, I don't know what that is. I was trying to find it, and I was going to block the channel, which I do frequently, have to block things, but I couldn't figure it out. So I don't know. But yeah, I don't know what's going to happen with him. He's going to have the same problem I had because my parents were taking me to R-rated movies when I was a kid, and then I still remember I think the first R-rated movie I saw was Saturday Night Fever or Apocalypse Now. I can't remember which one. It was one of those two.
Oh wow!
And then
Wow,
my
I remember
mom,
seeing Temple of Doom in a theater.
but that wasn't R though. That was only
And
PG-13, right?
wow, that's another one of those ones where I'm just shocked by the movie rating system
Yeah.
now as an adult. Just blows my mind because, I remember seeing Temple of Doom in a theater when I was way too young to see Temple of Doom and having like nightmares for like weeks of that, about the whole Kali Ma, like where he's pulling the heart out of the guy's chest.
The kids in slavery didn't bother you. It was the
Yeah,
pulling the chest out of the heart
I
out
was
of the chest.
totally fine with that. And
Yeah,
Monkey
that was
Brain's
cool.
totally cool with it.
Yeah.
The all that, but it was just that pulling the heart out of the chest part.
Yeah.
Man, I had nightmares for so long about that. And yeah, man, it's a weird scene now. My kids have been my oldest got really scared at the end of the first Harry Potter with Voldemort's head on the back of the guy's
Yeah.
thing, and that whole scene freaked her out a bit. But it was funny because all the rest of the ones, which I thought had some much more scary elements, just no problem whatsoever with that. So I think it just depends on the kids. Sometimes certain things scare the kids, and it's so hard for us to predict.
It is. Yeah. My like I said, my parents were, I think they just didn't know what to do with me exactly. So my mom would take me to the movie theater with friends and buy us tickets to stuff. Like she bought us a ticket to Alien. We went and saw that when it came out. And I still remember this. We were in line for Alien and there were people picketing because that's also the same time that Last Temptation of Christ came out.
Oh wow!
The Martin
I didn't
Scorsese
realize
picture.
that.
Yeah, it was the same time. So I was like, why are these people picketing? I didn't understand. Are they picketing Alien? It's a sci-fi movie. But that movie scared me. I remember looking for eggs under my bed for a while. So
Yeah, that's one that definitely could traumatize you. I didn't see that one until later. I do remember being at my father's house when I was much too young to see this, and going through his sort of collection of VHS tapes and trying to find something to put on. And I remember I was way too young to see it. I watched the opening scene from Children of the Corn,
Ooh.
where they just massacre the town.
Yeah.
And I was definitely too young to see that. It said Children of the Corn. I didn't think it was going to be that. I
About
remember
children. It's a kids movie.
yeah, it's got children in the title. It's got to
Sure.
be okay. And I just remember putting that on and that scene coming on and watching like the first few minutes of it. And then when everything hits the fan and everything's happening in it, just immediately like launching forward and hitting stop on the VHS player and immediately ejecting the tape and running it back into the room where it was, and then just having nightmares for quite a long time after that. I didn't watch that movie again until I was in college.
Wow.
It was until I was in college where I actually like watched that movie all the way through, because I had such a traumatizing experience from that when I was really young.
Have you ever had to walk out of a theater for anything? Because I remember walking out, and I went into the lobby. We saw American Werewolf in London in the theater, and I remember like, oh man, I had to step outside for like 5 minutes, and I can't remember what scene it was. I think it was, Jack, I'm sorry I called you a meatloaf or something. But then I was like, I'm gonna go outside for a second, get a breath of fresh air or whatever, and then I went back in. But I remember that was one of the few times I had to leave a theater for a minute. It was just that scary. But I went back, so I guess that's good. It's like getting back on the horse. But I've never been I like horror films, but that's not my jam. I don't watch gross, disgusting horror. I mean, I can, but it's never been. I like horror that's like Alien or something like that, which is like sci-fi horror or something. But then some of those are too weird too. So I don't know. I don't need to see gross stuff anymore, I guess. It doesn't do it for me.
I definitely remember hiding under the seat during Ghostbusters. When the
really?
taxi cab ghost. I can even tell you the exact ghost that it was. I was totally cool with watching that entire movie until he got to the taxi cab ghost, which was this sort of, zombie-esque, like flesh falling off of it ghost. The people get in the cab, and then like the ghost turns around and, to say like, oh, where are you going, or whatever it was, or something like that. And that scene like terrified me, and I remember like just darting down underneath the seat, and I think we were even in a drive-in theater. We might have been in a drive-in theater to see it, and then missing like the next 20 minutes of the movie, and then just coming in at the end of it. And that's one of those I think I watched like a month later and was totally fine, but that scene I remember seeing in the theater, that movie just freaked me out.
That's funny. Do you like horror films now, or do you not watch them usually?
I do. I like certain types of horror films. I'm not a. I like supernatural and fantastic sort of horror films. I don't like serial killery,
like slasher stuff.
Yeah, or like home invasion, or like torture porn.
Oh yeah, well that's just ridiculous. Yeah, no,
I'm not really into those films at all, and those really just I don't even see. Like they're definitely. I understand why people who like them do so, and how there is some problem. There's great amount of art put into them to do that, but they're just not for me. They just turn my stomach.
Yeah, I don't need to watch people get tortured, whatever. Like the Hostel movies. I mean, I saw them I try to see everything as much as you can, because someone told me this a long time ago, and I'm sure it's true. How do you know a good film when you have to see the bad ones too, so you can tell what a good one is? I don't know if that's true or whatever. I'm sure that's a cliche, but I try to see as much as possible, or I used to, but it's more difficult now because I don't get to leave the house as much. But luckily, there's video on demand or whatever. But yeah, I don't need to see that kind of stuff. Again, I prefer supernatural is cool. I like that, but I kind of prefer horror films that also are skewed, maybe like sci-fi horror or something like that. I don't know, but
that's my bag as well. Like I like some sort of escapism in the horror. Like I like it to be tense, but I also like it to not feel like it could happen at any point, or like that's sort of I guess, and I totally get why people like those types of movies. They're like that, and I will never actually disparage them, because I think it takes a great amount of art to do these sorts of films, and there's great directors who do them, and they're just not for me. Like it just turns my stomach, and I don't really enjoy watching them.
Yeah, again, I agree with you. There's definitely art and artistry involved in making them. I think in making anything, it's just that some people prefer different things. Like my wife loves the idea, or she doesn't love horror films, but if she's going to watch one, she'd rather it be like a slasher film, like a realistic villain, because that's somebody that she can deal with. But if it's like supernatural or something, or a ghost or whatever, it's like, oh, I don't like that stuff, because it's like, it's too scary, because I can't put my fist through it or whatever.
That's interesting. Interesting. Yeah, because
because she wants to have control of it. She can fight the thing. If it's like Jason or something, she could punch him in the face or whatever. But if it's a ghost, you can't do that. So she prefers the more physical sort of. Not that she likes to watch those kind of things, but then again, she also loves Harry Potter, which is fantasy and all that, which with ghosts and giant spiders and all that stuff. Yeah, we talked about Harry Potter for a minute, but that was like there's a spider in one of them. I can't remember which movie it is, but that's the only time my son was like, "Oh, I don't like that," because it had like a giant spider in it. But
Oh, interesting.
the spider even has a name. I can't remember what it is. But anyway, so spoiler: if you haven't seen Harry Potter, there's a giant spider. So, do you want to throw out some recommendations if you have anything like that?
There's so much great stuff out there. I mean, it really, like, we have such a great sort of like library of things out there, depending upon which services you have. There's so much good stuff on every service. I mean, if you have HBO or HBO Max, Watchmen, or right now Lovecraft Country is probably one of my favorite shows of the entire year.
It's awesome. I love that show. Yeah.
Yes, Lovecraft Country is so amazing. Watchmen's great. If you haven't seen that yet, that's amazing. And over on Netflix, there's great stuff there too. I mean, there's great stuff. Umbrella Academy, the series there is absolutely phenomenal. I love both seasons of Umbrella Academy. And there's so much good stuff out there. It's hard for me to even like to recommend too many things because everyone has certain things that they're into or that they like, or when the mood hits them. I'm definitely favoring escapism type stuff, fantasy type stuff lately, because the last thing I want to deal with is a lot of the real world. But I've also been watching some great docuseries, like The Vow has been a great one, or Wild Wild Country on Netflix is another great documentary series that came out recently. And so it's there's a lot out there, and my recommendation for people is to, while it's great to have these comfort movies and comfort shows, now is a great time to just watch some of the things that look interesting just based on the synopsis or the premise of it, or even just the key art that you see in for the in Netflix or Amazon or whatever, because they're putting out some great stuff. This is such a golden era of streaming right now, and I think it's just only going to get better. Check this stuff out, because there's a good chance you might see something that everyone is going to be talking about tomorrow. I mean, I feel like that's what happened with Tiger King. This thing came out and everyone's kind of like, I guess maybe I'll watch it. And then suddenly we started hearing from those people who did watch it and took that leap. And then everyone watched it. And I feel like that's where we're headed now with streaming is, just watch that thing that looks interesting to you. And chances are there's a ton of other people who are probably watching it too and really want to talk about it.
That's good. And I think that helps that people are watching some things that are the same and they can all talk about them, because it still gives you that sense of community, even though we're all separated supposedly and supposed to be isolating and all that stuff. And you can still enjoy things, just not all together, maybe in the same room, but you can still talk about them like we're kind of doing here, which is nice. This is why we brought the podcast back, because we wanted to talk about stuff and have something to do while we're stuck at home. So, but it's been good. It's been really fun. So
absolutely.
Anything that you're looking forward to that's going to be coming out soon? I know we won't necessarily get theatrical releases unless you're Christopher Nolan, but anything that's going to come out on video on demand, or any TV shows you're looking forward to, anything like that?
Oh man, I am definitely looking forward to whenever it does come out. The Dune, Denis Villeneuve's Dune adaptation there. That is one of the biggest ones that I'm looking forward to, because I love the book, and I love the series, and I'm really looking. I love Denis Villeneuve's films. He's just batting 1,000. Like, there's nothing that he's come out with that I haven't liked, and so it's that combined with this amazing cast, combined with this amazing source material. I'm super excited for Villeneuve's Dune movie, but who knows when that's going to come out? Right now, it's scheduled to come out in December in theaters. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I'm super excited for that one as far as really big releases.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I'm totally looking forward to that. I'm a fan of him of his, I should say, and I liked all his movies. I don't know that. I guess I just have a really deep attachment to Blade Runner for some reason. So I don't know that of all of his work so far, that his Blade Runner was probably not my least favorite of his. Which is not to say that it was terrible and I hated it. I still thought it was amazing, especially looking visually. It was amazing. It just didn't do as much for me as maybe some of the other ones. But that's neither here nor there. I definitely think that if there's any chance of anybody pulling off Dune sort of in the right way, or whatever that means, doing it justice, or at least trying to, getting close, then he's the person to probably do it. So I don't know. Did you watch the miniseries and all that for TV, or just the David Lynch version, or which have you liked any of the other ones?
I've seen both the miniseries and the David Lynch one, and they are products of their eras. The David Lynch one is a David Lynch project. I mean, it's I don't know how, it's not really super faithful and loyal to the story, but I love that it was made. I love that it exists because it's such a unique little film. And the miniseries, tried to hew closer to the book, and I think it's kind of cool that it's out there. It wasn't the greatest sort of adaptation, but I think it was better for people who wanted something that was a faithful retelling of the book that was closer to it. I think that's good, and I think that Villeneuve is the guy who's going to really give us something that is the best of both worlds, something that feels unique, but also hews closer to sort of the themes, if not the exact sort of, narrative of the book. And, Villeneuve, as like I said, there isn't a single film he's made that I haven't absolutely loved. So, I mean, he's just one of those guys where anything that he comes out with, I'm going to be very excited about. And then, of course, stuff like, Black Widow, whenever we get that, any Marvel movie, I'm going to be excited about as well. So, I'm hoping
I hope we get that soon. I hope that, I hope everything goes back to production, back to normal. I mean, unfortunately, people try to go back to work and then things happen, and just got to be more safe and maybe wait a little bit longer. And eventually, like we talked about at the beginning here, people are going to be able to get back to their lives, and there's going to be a vaccine. There's going to be some sense of normalcy, and we'll start getting the things back that we had before. But I don't want anyone to go back to make a movie for me and get ill and be in danger in any way. So I'm okay to wait as long as it takes, so it's safe and we can just watch.
And there's so much stuff on streaming too now that gives us an alternative. So I feel like there's no real rush. It's not like there's nothing to watch. There's so much out there. Just sifting through some of the categories, and Netflix is a chore in itself sometimes to its detriment sometimes. But there's so much good stuff on Netflix and on HBO Max and, on Amazon and on Hulu, and all of these sort of services that, and Disney Plus that there's no lack of things to watch while we're waiting for that thing to come out.
Exactly. All right, Rick. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. And it's been great to talk to you. And hopefully we'll get to do it again sometime soon.
This is wonderful. It's fun to just sit and talk movies and TV and pop culture and all of this stuff, man, because, we're all sort of in our own sort of bubbles these days. So it's nice to actually get out of them for a little while and just talk the way we used to talk. We'd be sitting around talking about, hey, what have you been watching? What's good? So this is nice. Exactly.
And that's, and it has been, and it will be. Hopefully we can do it again. And it's fun to just sort of shoot the shit like we used to back in the day.
Back in the day, man. It's been great. Thank you so much for having me on.
All right, man. Thank you. Thanks for coming. Find the Flickcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and pretty much anywhere else you can find podcasts. We're also on the Instagram and on the Twitters at TheFlickcast, and on Facebook too. We've also launched a Patreon, so if you want to support us, feel free. We'd really appreciate it. Thanks a lot.